Hi, I'm Steve Pond from TheWrap. We're here at our virtual Sundance Film Festival studios for Downfall, the Case Against Boeing. We have director Rory Kennedy, producer and writer Mark Bailey, Congressman Peter DeFazio, who is the head of the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, Wall Street Journal reporter Andy Pastor, who is featured in the film, and Michael Stumo, who lost his daughter in the crash of a Boeing plane that should not have been in the air. Rory, why don't you tell us a little bit about this film and what led you to want to make a movie about the story of the Boeing 737 Max, which had two horrific crashes within about 6 months in 2018 and 2019.
Thank you, Steve. It's nice to be here with you. I, like so many other people, followed this story as it unfolded. 346 people died on these plane crashes, two plane crashes that occurred within 5 months of each other. I really wanted to know what happened and who was responsible for these crashes, and also to try to make a film where we could learn enough to prevent something like this from happening again.
Mm-hmm. Michael, I see you there holding up a picture of your daughter, and I know there's a moment in the film where you're talking about how you don't want to keep going to hearings holding up a picture of your daughter. And I wonder, what led you to want to get involved in this film, which again will have you going through that story. What do you want to achieve?
We're fighting one of the biggest corporations in the world with their excessive focus on profit. And it is, we have to get the word out to everyone that in order to make change, in order to avoid a third crash, in order to further convince Boeing that cutting safety doesn't pay. This movie will go out into quite a few countries, and we need to let people know that the MAX is still not safe. There's still many critical safety systems that don't meet modern safety standards that the regulators let through. So if we're going to make a change, and aviation safety advances have happened when people die. I can't get my daughter back. Sammy was wonderful. I can't, we miss her dearly, but at least we need to make future aircraft safe, change Boeing, and Chairman DeFazio was a big part of that story.
Mm-hmm. Well, Andy, let me go to you, because as a veteran investigative reporter, I know you've explored lots of stories for the Wall Street Journal, but were there things about this particular story that shocked you the most, that you hadn't seen before?
There were quite a few things that shocked me and the colleagues that I work with, myself and the colleagues I work with, but particularly it's such a classic example of a corporation that simply didn't realize that what happened to it because of technical problems and management problems had pushed it into a whole new environment. Management refused to really acknowledge what happened and was dealing in the old archetype of how the company operated many decades before. A fabulous history, a sterling reputation, and they never really came to terms with the fact that they had to reassess, take responsibility, and look at the issues in a whole new light, that they were buffeted by pressures and questions and doubts that they never faced before. And instead of responsibly and ethically dealing with them, they basically resorted to obfuscation, fighting with the press, fighting with Congress, fighting with regulators, and really until the very end, unable to come to terms with the mistakes that they've made. And it was symbolized from the beginning, which I found astounding, and I've thought about this for years, when the chairman of Boeing first reacted to the initial crash of the MAX aircraft. He called it an unfortunate incident. that shocked everybody in the industry, and it certainly shocked the victims, the families of the victims. And that was the tone that the company set, really, from the beginning of their crisis.
Mhm. Congressman DeFazio, I mean, you conducted extensive um, investigations into this. What were the things that shocked you the most in your findings?
Well, look, after the first one went in, I had the head of safety from the FAA to my office, and he said, "Oh, that was a one-off. We think it was poor maintenance on the AOA sensor, this, that, blah, blah." The second one went in, and immediately we saw that the pattern was very similar. We knew there was something much more dramatically wrong with this plane. We launched our investigation. And, you know, bottom line is it's a sad story. You know, Boeing rushed this plane out. They put pressure on every employee to ignore concerns or worries. They concealed the existence of the system from pilots until after the first crash. And it was uncontrollable. Their own test pilot couldn't recover the plane in the mandated amount of time when he knew it was going to happen, let alone two other pilots taking off, say, out of Ethiopia. So, you know, what we had here basically was a corporate greed killed unnecessarily a bunch of people. And that really pissed me off.
Right. So how hard was it for you to actually get to the bottom of it? I mean, Boeing was not especially cooperative, right?
No, we had very, very lengthy negotiations with the House counsel and Boeing's counsel about getting documents. And then the documents came in huge dumps, you know, hundreds of thousands of pages, a lot of it irrelevant. But then we found traces, particularly the secret meeting at Boeing in 2013, where they said, hey, nobody outside the company can know about the system, because then the pilots would have to have simulator training. That costs money, and the company doesn't want that to happen. But that didn't start with the test pilot. That started at the top of the corporation.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Mark, this is a story where you've got a couple different aspects that you have to address in the film. I mean, there's the, you know, the very emotional story of people who lost family members. There's also a more technical story where you have to make clear things like IMCAS systems and corporate emails. So as you're constructing this, as you're writing it, how do you balance those?
It was tricky, and you know, I think that part of what helped is that the stories all intertwine. And, you know, if you look at the subjects, you know, the folks here on this panel, and Chairman DeFazio and Michael Stumo and Andy Pastor, you know, they each from very different vantage points approach this, you know, and Michael from this terrible loss and going out, and as he was, you know, sort of saying, looking to turn this loss and try and create change and create awareness, and working with Chairman DeFazio to do that. And then, you know, you have Andy working at the Wall Street Journal to try and, you know, get the truth out and uncover what he can as a journalist. And, you know, there's scenes, actual footage, you know, on the floor of Congress, you know, C-SPAN, where everybody's organically in the room together, and they're fighting to get these documents, and they're fighting to, you know, get Boeing in there and to get accountability, and to talk to Boeing, to talk to the FAA. And so there was a natural intersection, and it was just a matter of kind of figuring out how we were going to unfold that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Rory, from your point of view, what were the keys for you in telling this story?
Well, you know, it was a story that was still unfolding as we were documenting it. It was important for me not to use a narrator in the telling of this story, and really have it come from the people who were on the front lines of the story, the people who were most connected to it. So, you know, as you can see from this panel, there many of their stories, all of their stories are intersected throughout the film. It was challenging because there were ideas and concepts that were hard to translate. We used a number of different ways to communicate those from graphics. I think really helped to sort of visualize more some of the more difficult ideas that we were trying to communicate. We also used CGI. It was important for me to help audiences really get into the cockpit and understand what the challenges were for those pilots and what they were up against. You know, we now know, and I was really shocked to find out that as far back as 2016, that Boeing knew that if a pilot didn't respond between 4 and 10 seconds to what was happening, the result would be catastrophic. And catastrophic means the plane's going to crash and everybody's going to die. So, you know, we want to get to a point where we can communicate those ideas to the audience and help them understand what the implications of that were. We also showcase a document that was revealed between the two crashes, the TERM report, where Boeing knew and the FAA knew that there was a likelihood of 15 crashes on this airplane. And Boeing made the decision, knowing that, to put that second plane up into the air and all the other planes up in the air. And you see Sam Yastumo here. Knowing that Boeing knew the risk and what that meant, that people could die. And there was a decision to make that they made to prioritize profits over human loss.
Yeah.
And if I could, I just very quickly would like to jump on Rory's point. Even after the second crash, when reporters asked Boeing how the work on the software fixes were going, the fixes that they need to make in order to make the aircraft safe and regulators allow it to fly, they quickly retorted that it wasn't a fix. It was a revamp or an update or a revision of the software that was on the plane. And that encapsulates and really crystallizes their attitude throughout the crisis.
Right.
You know, there's never, ever in the history of aviation, modern aviation, have we allowed a plane, a passenger airliner, to fly with a critical single point of failure. And that's what this plane had. It was pointed out years before the accidents by a senior engineer at Boeing saying, wait a minute, shouldn't we use both AOA sensors? Because these are very delicate instruments which often fail with a bird crash or a bag flying up FOD. So this was just totally preventable and inexcusable. But the problem was it would have slowed the plane down, and they were in a rush to compete with Airbus and their Neo.
Right. Well, Chairman DeFazio, let me ask you. As Rory pointed out, the FAA was aware of this between the two crashes. I mean, are we in part of a system, a government that is biased in favor of corporate America, that lets big businesses and slide on things that it shouldn't?
Before the ValueJet crash in Florida many years ago, the FAA was charged with promoting and regulating the industry. As a junior member, I kept saying, you can't do both. And finally, I got my amendment adopted after those people died. But it crept back into the culture. They called Boeing a customer, not a regulated entity, a customer. And, for the life of me, I don't know what the head of safety at FAA did. That TERM should have grounded the plane. The report Rory just mentioned, saying that 15 of these are going to go in the life of the fleet. We've never let a plane fly like that before. No one has ever let a plane fly like that before. But, when we had a 7.5 hour interview with him, he didn't know anything about it. Well, what do you do as head of safety? And where did that go? So we not only reformed the way aircrafts are certificated and the way we're going to overlook the manufacturers, we made major reforms to to the FAA and its processes.
Right.
And I'd add on that, we're, as family members, we're interfacing with FAA folks regularly now, and there's a lot of pushback to make the implementation of that bill be just more of the same. There's factions in the FAA that they are pro-industry, just let them regulate themselves, delegate everything to them. And then, of course, when industry gets safety delegated to it, it views the safety as just a cost center to minimize. So it starts cutting, safety, cutting, the personnel and compromising their positions. We're seeing it now. So the aviation safety bill that Chairman DeFazio got through is fantastic. And now under the radar, Boeing and aircraft manufacturers have an interest in making sure it doesn't fully get implemented or it gets papered over. And Boeing is still powerful. We saw the defense that the criminal settlement that they had with the Department of Justice in January of last year. The film is very clear, showing this is a top-down problem to hide the new systems from the pilots. So there's no simulator training, but they convinced the Justice Department, just in the face of a criminal investigation as to them misleading the FAA and giving rise to these crashes, they convinced the government to immunize the Boeing executives, throw a couple pilots under the bus, say everything is just fine. We're trying to reopen that right now because as families, our rights to confer in a criminal investigation was violated as required by the Crime Victims' Rights Act. And so we're challenging it and hoping to get some justice from that right now. But at every level, Boeing is just, they have deep ties, and it's just, we can't rest.
Mm-hmm.
And to Michael's point, to date, there has been no Boeing executive or manager has faced any criminal penalties, despite the fact that 346 people died because of them.
I want to say one thing to listeners, and I hope this can get in there, but you need to avoid the Boeing MAX 8 and MAX 9 aircraft, okay? The old FAA put it back up in the air, tweak the software, but we're seeing a lot of in-flight emergencies in the data now. This MAX up in the air, the jack screw, a lot of problems with the jack screw. The flight crew alert system that you can see going haywire in the movie, it's got all these different rattles and beeps and things going on. And the modern flight crew alert systems are more like, can you imagine your car doing that? The flight crew alert systems now have all the notifications are in a red, green, yellow sort of panel, so you can prioritize and ignore what you need to do. And lastly, the auto throttle is supposed to be disengaging when invalid data comes into the flight management computer. That was a problem with the Ethiopian crash, is the auto throttle made that plane go too fast and drove it into the ground, into a hole. When I was there, I looked in, I couldn't see a plane. I was there. And that's still on it. So when you book a ticket, avoid the MAX 8 and MAX 9.
If I could, I'd like to go back to the people rather than the technology. The Justice Department settlement that Rory mentioned was really quite different from what the Justice Department typically does. Not only did they not file charges against any senior Boeing executives, but the document affirmatively says that the Justice Department was never able to determine that any senior executives participated in this criminal, basically conspiracy to hide things from the government. I covered hundreds of indictments and informations when I covered the Justice Department many years ago. I've never seen any document by the Justice Department which affirmatively says we never found anything against senior executives. If that's the case, they simply don't file any charges and don't mention any senior executives. But this document really went out of its way. The Justice Department went out of its way to give Boeing a shield for future litigation and really for future criminal investigation, regardless of whatever new information may be uncovered. And that's really quite dramatic. And I've never seen that done before.
And
that's good to know, because we're going to be meeting with Merrick Garland in the next week on this. So I didn't know that.
I will also want to add a footnote to that the prosecutor who was representing the Department of Justice against Boeing was then subsequently hired by Boeing's law firm.
Wow. Well, this is obviously a conversation that should and will go on for a long time. I think we need to wrap up now, but Rory and Mark, congratulations on a very powerful film, and for all of you, I hope that it really helps and gets us to a better place.
Thanks, Steve. We appreciate you giving it some attention, and it's always great to see you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.